Our first Fireside discussion today with Telesat's President and CEO, Dan Goldberg, is a great place to start to really dive into some of the issues impacting Canada's space economy. Now, some Canadians may not realize this, but Telesat, based here in Ottawa, is one of the largest and most innovative global satellite operators, competing in one of the world's most competitive and dynamic industries. It's hard to believe, but for over 50 years, Telesat has been one of the key companies responsible for the growth and the development of global satellite communications. In fact, in 1972, Telesat launched the world's first domestic communications satellite in geostationary orbit. It was a source of some pride for Canada. Now, with more achievements since then than I have time to mention, Telesat is now undertaking their most ambitious program and the largest space program in Canada's history. Through a $6.5 billion investment, Telesat is launching a next generation constellation of 300 highly advanced satellites in low Earth orbit that will revolutionize global connections, enabling high-speed connectivity and 5G around the entire world, as well as bringing high-speed internet to the aeronautical, maritime, and government verticals that lack it today. Now, some of you will likely also have heard the news recently of various investments being made in the development of the technology, including by the governments of Quebec, Ontario, and Canada, to help meet our rural connectivity goals and to solidify Canada's position as a global leader in the burgeoning new space economy. This will be a vital step forward for Canada. Now, for his part, Dan has served as the president and CEO of Telesat since 2006. A remarkable leadership tenure. Dan, I was very pleased to have been one of the first to welcome you and Whitney and the kids to Ottawa when you first came to Telesat. And I'm delighted to welcome you to today's summit. Over to you to deliver some opening remarks before our discussion.
Oh, Perrin, thank you very much. And thanks for that kind introduction and for the warm welcome that you and Julie gave me and Whitney and the kids when we came here. Hard to believe, about 15 years ago. And thanks for inviting me this morning to chat with you about what's going on at Telesat, what's going on in what we think about as the new space economy, which is just sort of burgeoning right now and full of huge promise, which is why we are embarking on what you correctly described as a very ambitious, a very innovative project that we hope is going to ensure Telesat's success for the next 52 years. And so, but what you said is right. Our industry is growing, it's dynamic, it's competitive, and for me, coming to Canada 15 years ago and being asked to lead Telesat was a huge privilege and a great opportunity for me and my family, because Telesat has always been a pioneer, and Canada's always been a pioneer in the space sector. Telesat was the brainchild of the government of Canada all the way back in 1969 when Parliament passed the Telesat Canada Act, and it was visionary. It was, at a time when the whole world was gripped with all the exciting achievements that were happening in space. It was the Americans, it was the Soviets, and Canada properly recognizing that it had this massive country that needed to get stitched together. It had been stitched together, with the railroads about a century earlier, but it needed to be stitched together coast to coast to coast from a communications perspective. And that really was, sort of the genesis of Telesat. Since that time, we have, through hard work, risk-taking, a lot of great innovation, a lot of good partnering with others in Canada, we have grown to be, yes, one of the world's largest satellite companies. And you and I are speaking at what is our next new and exciting chapter as we embark on this very large initiative that you spoke about.
Well, Dan, thank you very much for those introductory remarks. It is an exciting time, and I guess Canada's involvement in space even went back to the Anik satellite, which I think we were the first country in the world to have a domestic communications satellite.
Correct.
Space. And to speak about the technology, this lasted well beyond its expected lifespan as well.
It did. It's a testament to the good engineering and the good execution from Team Canada. It was Telesat for sure that was sort of the architect and promoter of the project, but there were other Canadian companies in the supply chain. So it was a massive success, and on the on the foundation of Anik A1, yes, the company working hand in glove with government, working hand in glove with Canadian industry, just continued to innovate and to build and invest to get us to the point where we are today. And the technology, like technologies in every sector that we're all familiar with, has evolved dramatically, and it's evolving now at a pace. And I've been in this industry for about 30 years now. I've never participated at a time with such dynamism, such innovation, such interesting new players coming into the sector. And you had Sir Richard Branson speaking just before us. The sector is attracting more and more investment and more interesting new players. And Sir Richard Branson is one of them. Elon Musk is another. Jeff Bezos and Amazon. So it's an exciting time in the sector right now.
It is indeed. Let's take a few minutes to talk about that. But for our audience members, if you have a question you'd like to contribute, please use the Slido link that you received with your registration information. Our team behind the scenes will be filtering through all of this, and we'll work to bring them up to the virtual stage. So if you have questions for Dan, please send them in via Slido. So Dan, today the global space economy is around $350 billion, with Canada's share being about $5.5 billion. In the next couple of decades, the global space economy is expected to hit $1 trillion. Tell us more about the new space race that's taking place in low Earth orbit, and how is this driving the exponential growth in the industry globally?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think underlying this new push into low Earth orbit satellite constellations and all the things that are required to support that. So more advanced and capable and low-cost rockets, for instance, which you need to launch hundreds, thousands of satellites into low Earth orbit. But the big underlying catalyst and driver is this unquenchable global demand for broadband connectivity. And we're all seeing it, we're all living it. You and I are, and your audience are living it now. I think the pandemic, if anything, has underscored the importance of, always on, affordable connectivity that's also ubiquitous, so that not only can you and I sitting, here in downtown Ottawa connect and have a good high quality, virtual video conversation, but everybody across Canada needs the ability to do that, whether you're living in Ottawa or Toronto, or you're located in the far north, you're located in a rural, in a remote setting. And then you take that Canadian experience and you just extrapolate all over the world. The government of Canada at the federal and provincial level has, I think, appropriately been very focused on bridging the digital divide in Canada. But I would say that public policy objective is shared in almost every country around the world, and we're doing business in virtually every country in the world right now. There's a heavy focus. So what does that mean? When you're trying to connect everyone, fiber communications are really good when you have dense areas of population density. But when you get out of the city, and as we all know, you don't have to get too far out of the city to start losing good connectivity. You need to find other technologies that can deliver that connectivity and can deliver it affordably, reliably, securely. And we've all been casting around, we at Telesat, Elon Musk at SpaceX, Jeff Bezos at Amazon. We've all been casting around for new technologies. Well, how are we going to solve this? And Telesat's been in this business for 50 years, but we've been looking after our customers' communications requirements with geostationary satellites. They're located 36,000 kilometers above the Earth. They're great for distributing, hockey night in Canada and video distribution and whatnot, but for high-speed broadband, affordable internet connectivity, they're too far out in space, Perrin, in order for to allow a good, reliable, speedy, fast broadband connectivity. And it's physics. It just takes a while for the signal to go from the ground all the way up to 36,000 kilometers and back again. And the only way to solve it in space is to get the satellite closer to the Earth. And that's been the driver for these low Earth orbit satellites. And it's an opportunity that the industry has looked at for decades, but it's only been because of some really exciting technological developments. Some of that is the rockets. Some of that has to do with 3D printing, artificial intelligence, machine learning. It's harnessing all these technologies and being very thoughtful, very, resourceful and innovative in how you stitch them together to enable these low Earth orbit satellites to fill this important void, connecting the world. And so anyway, that I'd say that's been the big driver. It's exciting. Sometimes it's a bit too exciting. So we're taking that on right now.
There's certainly a stampede of companies looking at getting into it, and that really presages a revolution here on the ground. And
it absolutely does.
Available. I guess we've had a bit of a foretaste of it during COVID, where we've seen people remote working, where we've seen health services delivered digitally to the most remote parts of the country. And that's just a taste of what's to come.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And you're right. There has been, a stampede of companies and countries that see the opportunity. And space has always been strategic for countries. Yes, there are these more civil, consumer-oriented applications that we're talking about, like broadband connectivity at your home, at your cottage, while you're, driving in your car. And those are important, and enterprises need it and governments need it. But also with space, there's always been also kind of a national security dimension as well. And so in addition to having companies like SpaceX and Amazon and Telesat, which are, private companies, you also have the government of China, the government of Russia, the Europeans that are very, very focused on maintaining their positions in space. And they're, devoting billions and billions of dollars of investment to making sure that they don't get left behind in this new space race. And if you look hard enough, even at SpaceX, who their big customer is, tends to be the US government. Most of these rockets that are going up are carrying astronauts or other government payloads. And that's an important thing for, I think, for all of us to remember, and certainly the government of Canada to remember. This is an area where there's a big role to play for private industry, but there's also a big role to play here for governments, given the national security implications and the scale of these projects, and the fact that they're just inherently global in nature, which throws up issues around technology transfer, around market access, around competing for scarce orbital and spectrum resources. So there's a lot going on here.
I want to ask you about the Lightspeed project, which I mentioned earlier, but just before I do, let me pick up on your last point there. What about the issues where so many people are putting satellites into space? What about the challenges in terms of finding a parking spot?
Well, on the one hand, space is vast. It actually can accommodate a fair amount of actors launching satellites at various orbits. I mentioned, Telesat started its business in geostationary orbit. That's 36,000 kilometers above the Earth. Our Lightspeed satellites will be operating around 1,000 kilometers above Earth. SpaceX is operating their constellation at around 500 kilometers above. So there's, there are various parking spots. Even within those parking spots, space is large. And yet, that doesn't diminish the importance of being a responsible user in space. There are risks. There are risks of collisions in space, and that's happened before. And when that happens, it's extraordinarily threatening to everybody that's operating in space. These debris fields are created, which then represent a big threat. There are other ways that the use of space can prejudice life here on Earth, including just the ability to enjoy the night skies, and for astronomers to make sure that they can continue to do the good work that they're doing without having a lot of clutter and glare coming off of these objects. And so there's a big role for governments to play in making sure that their licensed space actors are engaging in a way that's responsible, that are following rules. And there are opportunities for, supranational bodies. The UN has a group called the International Telecommunications Union that promulgates rules and regulations, and every country in the world participates in those. But, at the end of the day, countries are sovereign. Some countries are better actors than others. Some individual companies are better actors than others. This is a classic area where the regulatory response is always lagging what people are actually doing, and it's got to catch up. And so, but that it's a great question, and it's a timely one.
So tell us then about the Lightspeed project. It's pretty exciting.
Well, no, thanks for that. And I could talk about Lightspeed for a long time, so I'll try to restrain myself. But what we've done is we've identified, like some of these other companies we talked about, an enormous commercial opportunity to provide global broadband connectivity, really focused on not competing in core urban markets with, here in Canada, companies like Bell and Rogers and TELUS who are laying fiber out, but our focus is really serving more remote and rural users, and doing it in a way that partners with a lot of the existing mobile network operators, internet service providers, giving them a more affordable, cheaper broadband pipe so that they can roll out 5G to remote and rural areas, and bridge this digital divide here in Canada and also elsewhere around the world. The way the Telesat's doing it, and I have to say, we've got a lot of world-class engineers that work at Telesat. We're good at this, and we've been doing it for a long time. We've developed what I'm absolutely persuaded is the most advanced, the most innovative architecture to roll out this highly capable low Earth orbit satellite that is comprised of about 300 highly advanced satellites that I'm proud to say will be manufactured right here in Canada. All of these satellites will talk to each other in space with optical lasers So what we're deploying is a big space-based, fully meshed IP network that's highly flexible, highly capable, that allows us to deliver dynamically, flexibly, reliably, because this fully meshed network can back itself up, terabits and terabits of affordable broadband connectivity all over the world, including throughout all of Canada.
This
So
is the
that's
stuff of science fiction. You're talking about them communicating by laser in space, 300 of them.
yes, yes, and optical links in space have been done before, but never at this scale, and never leveraging not just this optical laser technology, but other technologies. We talked about, a significant amount of this of the components are going to be 3D printed right here in Canada. We're going to be leveraging very advanced electronically steerable antennas that are going to be manufactured by another storied Canadian space company, in this case, McDonnell Detweiler, MDA, also right here in Canada. And so we're taking these technologies, Perrin, all of which are proven technologies, but never have been integrated and harnessed in a way and at this scale. And we're bringing them together and stitching them together, and are going to be, in a few short years, we're going to start launching our first satellites in about 2 years' time. In about a year from now, you and I will be able to go to this factory outside of Montreal and watch these highly advanced satellites rolling off the assembly line. We're going to be building about 30 a month. It's next gen space age stuff, but it's exactly what we need to do to bridge the digital divide. It's exactly what Telesat needs to do to remain competitive in this highly competitive global space race that we find ourselves in. It's going to be a great opportunity for Telesat. It's going to be a great opportunity for the entire Canadian supply chain. And Canada really is a world leader in this domain. And it's a great opportunity for governments here, which is why, and you made a reference to it, it's why we've attracted the support and the investment that we have from the government of Canada, from the government of Ontario, and the government of Quebec, who not only are focused on bridging the digital divide in all of Canada, but also Quebec and Ontario, but they see the opportunity for the economic development, the job creation, the export opportunities, the opportunities to innovate really world-leading technologies. So in any event, it's a really exciting time.
Dan, tell us about what do these satellites look like? What size are they, for example?
They're pretty big. So some of our competitors, and SpaceX is one of them, are launching a whole lot more, but much smaller, much less capable satellites. Our satellites are, I don't know, just to picture it, probably going to be the size of maybe a large commercial refrigerator. They're going to be about a half a ton or so. They're still going to be pretty good size. So we've opted to launch fewer satellites, which is going to make a lot of people in the astronomical community happy. Less kind of debris up there, brightening up the night skies. So we've opted to launch fewer satellites, but that are much more technologically advanced. We think that's a better way to solve the problem. We think it's more economically efficient, right? It just requires fewer rockets, fewer satellites. When Facebook is very focused on, connecting everyone on the planet for their own reasons. They went out and they hired, unbeknownst to us, a bunch of MIT PhD students to evaluate all the different low Earth orbit satellite constellations out there. They looked at ours and SpaceX's and some others. They judged our constellation to be the most efficient and the most advanced, which we always believed, but it was nice to have that kind of independent, impartial validation of that. So these satellites are going to be, they're going to be large, they're going to be highly advanced, they're going to be highly capable. And as I said, they're going to be built right here in Canada.
Tremendous. Well, we've had some questions coming in from the audience. Now you're able to communicate in space through lasers. Reach my iPad here. I need these. What does Dan think of the launch of Inspiration 4 tonight and the expansion of civilian spaceflight generally?
Well, I think it's immensely exciting. The reality was for the longest time in the US, right, there are a few countries that were have the capability to put people in space, the United States, the Russians, and the Chinese. But the US space program was all kind of driven by NASA, and it was the shuttle program. Huge accomplishments, obviously, but expensive to the point where it just wasn't sustainable. And it was actually the Obama administration that ultimately pulled the plug on the shuttle program, but I think correctly wasn't abandoning space and wasn't abandoning quite the contrary, wasn't abandoning the desire of the U.S. to have access to space, but I think properly understood that the best way to lower costs, expand capability, was to partner with the private sector to innovate and to make access to space more affordable and to democratize it. And that's really, that was the genesis of SpaceX. And SpaceX was the recipient of a lot of US government support and funding. But it wasn't just SpaceX, it was Boeing, it was Lockheed. Now it's Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos's company, is also competing for these projects. So I believe net, it's an extraordinarily good thing for the US, for humanity. These lower cost rockets are things that we're leveraging. It's enabling us to close a business case to launch our low Earth orbit satellite constellation and to affordably bridge the digital divide. So it has knock-on effects outside of just sending people to space. But it's not something that is worry-free. There is a role for government to play in regulating. You need to have, as light of a touch regulatory framework as you can, but equally, these activities can't be completely unregulated.
Not the Wild West.
Yeah, it can't be. And there's been a little bit of Wild West in space lately. And that represents a threat, not just to those of us who are using space to support our activities, but to all of us who are relying on space. And it's all of us, who are watching television and swiping their credit card or using an ATM. All of this at the end of the day gets connected through space. So I think it's very exciting. And I think the Obama administration was right to partner with private industry. I think great things have come from that. But I think that there's still a role for government to play in making sure that all of this is done responsibly.
Another question, Kent Roberts asks this, with all these new players in the space economy, how will the global industry and governments come together to regulate, monitor, and manage the assets? Certainly follows on to what you were saying. World history would show we do not have a good track record. For example, climate change.
Yes, no, well, listen, I agree with that. And that's a bit of what I was referring to when I said that this is another example, and you see this all the time. You see it in social media today, where the technology just gets out in front of the regulatory framework. And what's tricky about space is that yes, every country has a role to play, but take SpaceX, they're regulated by the US government, but their activities obviously have impacts on people all over the world who are looking at the stars and who are using the internet potentially. And so this really requires countries working together in these, international fora. I mentioned the International Telecommunications Union. And as I mentioned also, I've been doing this for a long time. We've always needed to work together at these levels. And I can tell you that some countries are more cooperative and more responsible than others. And I have to say, Canada does a very good job in this area, trying to get the balance right between allowing the private sector to innovate and develop, but also working with other countries to make sure that there aren't these negative externalities. But like climate change, you can have 100 countries doing all the right things, and you can have 20 countries thumbing their nose at it, and you still end up in a very bad place. And we have that same challenge in space.
Let's go to another question. And just to remind people again, if you have a question, please submit it through the Slido app and it will come to us that way. Russell has a question. Does the tech and Lightspeed lend itself to adaptation or deployment further afield, such as comms to the moon, to Mars, and to beyond?
It absolutely does. Our principal focus has been filling this void of deploying technologies that are efficient and reliable and economically efficient for providing broadband connectivity to these rural and remote areas. And that's a challenge in developed countries like Canada, but it's an even bigger challenge in continents and in many countries, for instance, throughout Africa, throughout Latin America, throughout Southeast Asia, where you just don't have the income level, and yet still connecting everybody is vitally important. So that's been our first focus, but absolutely, once you deploy a constellation like this, you can do all sorts of other interesting things. Monitoring climate change is actually an example. So for instance, we're focused on broadband connectivity, but we're talking to other companies, and there's one right here in Canada, GHGSat, who is focused on doing methane observation, which is obviously a big threat. And so they would launch their own satellites that would detect methane all over the world, and they would use we could put optical links on their satellites that would communicate throughout our constellation. And so they could route that methane detection data in real time to anywhere in the world. So there are so many, once you deploy a constellation like this and you help advance the technology development around optical communications, around these phased array antennas, there's so much more you can do, including, yes, we are responding to RFPs from NASA about providing broadband connectivity, for instance, to the space station or for lunar landings and beyond. So yes, the knock-on opportunities are massive.
So literally the sky isn't the limit with this.
The sky is not the limit, Perrin.
Another question here. What sort of launch platforms does Telesat need? Would it be possible to launch your satellites using maritime launch services sometime down the line from Canada?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, our focus is, I'll take a step back. We are in as you mentioned, Perrin, a very competitive global industry that is becoming more competitive with each passing day. And so in order for Telesat to remain competitive, we need a good, competitive, reliable supply chain. And for us, having access to affordable, capable rockets is a very important part. If I think about we have said that our project about, we're going to spend about US $5 billion, so about 6.5 billion Canadian dollars to deploy these 300 advanced low Earth orbit satellites. What we pay for launch services for the rockets to get all those satellites in space is a very meaningful part of that 6.5 billion. So the more launch providers we have, and there are some launch providers we can't use. So for instance, the Chinese have a very capable rocket, but we can't use that rocket because of technology transfer issues. And so if there is a domestic Canadian capability, launch capability, now it's got to be reliable. It's got to be affordable. We can't use rockets that are too expensive. We're then no longer able to be competitive. We can't use rockets that aren't reliable. You know, we need to get our satellites up there and get them up there fast and get them up there cheap. But if there is a domestic, affordable, reliable capability, that'd be fantastic for us. We're building our satellites in Canada. Shipping them to the launch pad is also, you know, a cost issue and a risk issue for us. If we can keep them in the country, that'd be fantastic. We would love that.
Another question. Do you agree with this statement? The privatization of space is leading to a two-tier system where only the rich can afford to travel beyond Earth. Airlines are private, yet not everyone can afford to travel to Malaysia, for example. Have you concerns that people are simply being priced out of this?
I think, I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's the opposite. Look, you know, not everyone can afford to buy a ticket on, you know, Blue Origin's rocket or SpaceX's rocket or Richard Branson's rocket. I can't. But I can tell you launch costs are coming down dramatically because of, for instance, SpaceX coming into the market. The cost for a launch vehicle is about a third of what we used to pay for a launch vehicle, which means, again, that's one of the great enablers for us being able to close a business case for our low Earth orbit satellite constellation. If access to space continued to be a government monopoly, my own experience is government monopolies almost never lead, I can't really think of a single instance, to lower prices, to greater availability of the capability. The reality is I believe by allowing more private actors to develop these technologies, the cost of being able to go to space are coming down. It's coming down dramatically. Does that mean everybody on Earth is going to be able to afford a ticket to go to space? Not in my lifetime. Maybe, you know, a couple of lifetimes from now, it really will be like that. But in short, no, I wouldn't agree with that statement. I think that having all these private actors come in is dramatically reducing the cost of going to space and opening those opportunities up for a whole lot more people. It doesn't mean they should be unregulated, as we said, but I think having these actors come in, investing their own capital is a good thing.
This brings me to another question I've been wanting to ask you. You mentioned earlier that there were national programs still. And for example, from China and from Russia, these are the resources that you have from government to be able to compete in this area. You're looking to private sector investments for the most part. What are the implications for you? How does this impact your business here in Canada and your operations globally because of the presence of these state players?
Perrin, this is something that, you know, we've been dealing with, if you will, for decades. It's not like we haven't been, you know, required to compete with state actors in the past. We do. I mean, there are, you know, the government of China, the government of Russia, the government of India, has been, operating their own satellites and competing with Telesat and other purely commercial satellite operators for years and years and years. But I would say with the advent of these LEO constellations, it's an even more serious consideration because the capital that's required to fund these low Earth orbit satellites is vastly greater than what's been required to launch a geostationary satellite, number one. Two, because these constellations are inherently global, it means we're going to be competing with them, not just, for instance, in Asia or in Eastern Europe, but on a global basis. It's a significant competitive consideration, and it introduces, what I would say are strategic issues too. Are you going to be able to get market access in those countries when they're launching their own low Earth orbit satellite constellations? Are they going to favor their domestic players? In my experience, the answer is always yes. And so what that means is that our government and other governments need to be aware of this if they want to see their domestic companies compete on a level playing field. They're going to need to take that into account when they think about how they partner with companies like Telesat, or in the US, companies like SpaceX, to counterbalance the amount of state funding that is flowing to these other players that, whether we like it or not, we have to compete with.
I think we have time for one more question here. Michael has sent in a question. What consideration has there been into creating or supporting a critical mass of SME product developers in Canada to support space programs beyond government funding? Have you a program you've been looking at SMEs and how they can be supported?
Yes, absolutely. And we are working with small and medium enterprises here in Canada to support our current business, which, is still a pretty big business, but also to help us with this new ambitious Lightspeed constellation. We announced, I think quite recently, a partnership that we've formed with a company called CloudOps, which is a Montreal-based company that specializes in helping companies like Telesat leverage the cloud. A big part of our Lightspeed constellation is going to be operating in the cloud. We're really, really good here at Telesat at designing satellites, at procuring rockets, at operating satellites. We're less good in cloud. We're learning more and more about IP networking. We're learning more and more about optical communications. And so we are partnering with companies all over the world, including here in Canada, to get better and to fill in the competency gaps that we have. And so one way we're doing that is we're hiring lots of individuals. If you're an individual out there and you've got IP networking capability, you've got cloud expertise, please, come to Telesat. But we're not able to do it just by hiring new people. We're needing to partner with others. And yes, focusing on small and medium enterprises that can help us fill in these competency gaps. CloudOps is one example of that. There are others. We're very keen to do that. And that's a great thing. Sorry to interrupt, Perrin, but yes, we're investing $6.5 billion in this project. It I believe is going to help Telesat advance and grow and be more competitive. But there's a whole supply chain. I mentioned MDA. I mentioned CloudOps. There are others that we're working with, that we're partnering with, that are going to help them grow their businesses, develop new technologies that then they can export all over the world.
Incredibly exciting. And Dana, there's probably not a better note to leave it on than to the point that you just made, that this isn't just for the big guys.
No.
The benefits that come from Canada's presence in space benefit all of our citizens, and they benefit businesses of all sizes.
Including your members, Perrin.
And it's something that we do well in Canada. It is
something that Canada is world class in, and something that we can never be complacent about, because we have these capabilities today. But in this fast moving, highly competitive global environment, if we don't, if we're not cognizant of those capabilities, if we don't nurture those capabilities, they will be gone. And once they're gone, they're very difficult, if not impossible, to rebuild. But the good news is we've got this big project, the biggest, most ambitious, largest space project in Canada's history. And, you know, we need a village, we need a team to help us build this and carry it into the world. And that can not only help sustain the capabilities we have, but to dramatically grow them. And that's what we're focused on right now.
A powerful and inspirational message, Dan. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today and for sharing your perspectives on Canada's future in space. It's exciting, it's inspirational, it really energizes all of us. And we recognize that Telesat is certainly going to be a very big part of that, what could be a very bright future. And we're also going to enjoy hearing from your SVP of Canadian Sales, Michelle Beck, during a panel later today. Now, to our viewers, coming up next at 10:15 Eastern is our first panel discussion of the day. The Sky is Not the Limit. It will be hosted by Tarek Malik, who's the editor-in-chief of space.com, and we'll hear from the presidents of United Launch Alliance, MDA, and the Satellite Canada Innovation Network on the future possibilities of space travel and exploration. So just click on next session when it pops up on your screen by 10:15. Thanks, and we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you, Perrin.